dragged through the desert for 10 days, until a human whispered, "You're safe now." The capturer Zara Night Whisper pressed her back against the cold stone wall of the underground chamber, her violet eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of escape. The metallic taste of fear lingered on her tongue as she heard the heavy footsteps of her captors approaching. She had been so careful, so meticulous in her research about the ancient artifacts hidden beneath the Saharan sands, but apparently not careful enough. "There she is," growled Victor Bloodmane, the leader of the mercenary group that had been tracking her for weeks. His scarred face twisted into a cruel smile as he gestured to his men. "The famous archaeologist who thinks she can steal from us." Zara lifted her chin defiantly. "I'm not stealing anything. These artifacts belong in a museum, not in the hands of black market dealers." Her voice remained steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. Victor laughed, the sound echoing off the ancient walls. "Bold words for someone who's about to become our insurance policy." He nodded to his lieutenant, Cassius Ironfist, a mountain of a man with dead eyes. "Tie her up. We're taking her with us." The next few hours blurred together in a nightmare of rough handling and harsh voices. Zara found herself bound and gagged, thrown into the back of a jeep as Victor's crew prepared to cross the desert. She had overheard enough of their conversation to understand their plan. They intended to use her as leverage against the Egyptian authorities who had been closing in on their operation. As the convoy of 3 vehicles pulled away from the archaeological site, Zara caught her last glimpse of civilization through the dusty rear window. The small research station, where she had been working for the past 6 months, grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared entirely, swallowed by the endless expanse of golden sand. The first day was the worst. The desert sun beat down mercilessly on the open jeep, and Zara's fair skin began to burn despite her long-sleeved shirt. Victor had ordered her hands tied behind her back and a rope around her waist, connecting her to the vehicle like a piece of cargo. When they stopped for the night, she was given barely enough water to wet her lips and a few scraps of stale bread. "Please," she whispered to Cassius as he stood guard over her. "I need more water. I won't survive this heat." The giant man stared down at her with those emotionless eyes. "Victor says you get what you get. Nothing more." By the 3rd day, Zara's lips were cracked and bleeding. Her tongue felt like sandpaper in her mouth, and her vision had started to blur. The mercenaries seemed immune to the desert's harsh conditions, their dark skin and years of experience protecting them from the worst of it. She, on the other hand, was slowly dying. The nights brought no relief. The temperature dropped dramatically, leaving her shivering in her thin clothes while her captors slept comfortably in their sleeping bags. She lay on the hard sand, staring up at the brilliant canopy of stars, wondering if anyone would ever find her remains. Victor enjoyed taunting her during their brief stops. "Your university friends probably think you're dead already," he would say, crouching beside her prone form. "No rescue is coming, little archaeologist. You're worth more to us alive, but that doesn't mean we have to keep you comfortable." On the 7th day, one of the vehicles broke down. The delay meant spending extra time in the desert, and Zara could see the worry creeping into even Victor's eyes. They were running low on supplies, and the longer they stayed out here, the more dangerous it became for everyone. "We should have reached the rendezvous point by now," she heard Cassius mutter to Victor as they worked on the broken engine. "We'll make it," Victor snapped back, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. Zara closed her eyes and tried to conserve what little strength she had left. 10 days. Could she survive 10 days in this hell? The stranger in the 8th day. As the sun reached its merciless peak, Zara could barely keep her eyes open. The rope around her waist had rubbed her skin raw, and every breath felt like inhaling fire. She had given up hope of rescue, focusing instead on simply making it to the next moment. Then the next. That's when she first saw him. A figure appeared on the horizon, shimmering like a mirage in the heat waves. At first, she thought her dehydrated mind was playing tricks on her, but as the convoy approached, the figure became more solid, more real. A man stood alone in the vast expanse, seemingly unbothered by the killing heat. "What the hell?" Victor muttered, raising his binoculars. "There's someone out there. The stranger was tall and lean, with sun-darkened skin and hair the color of desert sand. He wore simple clothes, a white cotton shirt and khaki pants that somehow remained clean despite the harsh environment. Most remarkably, he showed no signs of distress from the heat that was slowly killing Zara. As the jeeps drew closer, Zara could see his face more clearly. He had strong, angular features and the most striking green eyes she had ever seen. There was something almost otherworldly about him, as if he belonged to the desert itself. "Stop the vehicles," Victor ordered, his hand moving to the weapon at his side. The stranger, who appeared to be in his early 30s, watched their approach with calm curiosity. When the convoy came to a halt 50 feet away, he began walking toward them with unhurried steps. "That's far enough," Victor called out, climbing from his jeep with his rifle raised. "Who are you? What are you doing out here?" The stranger paused, tilting his head slightly as if considering the question. When he spoke, his voice carried an unusual accent that Zara couldn't place, melodic and somehow ancient. "I am Kai Desertwing," he said simply. "I live here." Victor laughed harshly. "Nobody lives in the middle of the desert." "Friend, you lost or something?" Kai's green eyes swept over the group, taking in the weapons, the stolen artifacts loaded in the vehicles, and finally settling on Zara. She saw something flicker across his features, anger, perhaps, or recognition of her suffering. "I am not lost," Kai replied, his gaze still fixed on Zara. "But perhaps you are." There was something in his tone that made Victor shift uncomfortably. The mercenary leader had survived by reading people, by recognizing threats, and everything about this stranger set off alarm bells in his head. "Look, we don't want any trouble," Victor said, though his weapon remained trained on Kai. "We're just passing through with a prisoner." Kai observed, nodding toward Zara. "She's not your concern." Kai took another step closer, and Victor's men raised their weapons. But the stranger seemed utterly unafraid, as if bullets couldn't touch him. "Everything in my desert is my concern," Kai said softly. The words sent a chill down Zara's spine. Despite the blazing heat, there was power in his voice, ancient and undeniable. For the first time since her capture, she felt a flicker of hope. Victor's finger tightened on his trigger. "Back off, or we'll put you down right here." Kai smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "You may try." The standoff stretched for several tense seconds. Zara could see the sweat beading on Victor's forehead, could sense the uncertainty rippling through his men. They were hardened killers, but something about this lone figure in the desert terrified them. Finally, Victor made his decision. "Move out," he barked to his men. "We don't have time for this." As the vehicles prepared to leave, Kai called out, "The woman is dying. Not your problem," Victor shot back. "It will be yours if she dies," Kai replied, his green eyes seeming to glow in the harsh sunlight. "The desert does not forget debts of blood." Victor paused, clearly unsettled by the cryptic warning, but his greed won out over his fear. "Drive," he ordered Dot as the convoy pulled away. Zara twisted in her bonds to look back at the stranger. Kai stood motionless, watching them disappear into the heat haze. But just before they crested the next dune, she could have sworn she saw him smile and nod, as if making her a promise. The encounter had lasted less than 10 minutes, but it changed everything. For the first time in days, Zara allowed herself to believe that she might actually survive this ordeal. The rescue in the 10th day, Zara was more dead than alive. Her lips were cracked and bleeding, her skin burned raw by the relentless sun. The rope around her waist had cut deep welts, and she could barely lift her head. Victor's men had grown increasingly nervous, muttering among themselves about bad omens and desert spirits. "She's not going to make it," Cassius said, staring down at Zara's prone form during their midday rest. "Maybe we should cut our losses." Victor wiped sweat from his brow, his eyes darting nervously across the endless dunes. Ever since their encounter with the strange man 2 days ago, he had been on edge. "She's worth too much to just abandon," he growled, but his voice lacked conviction. That's when the sandstorm appeared. It rose from the horizon like a golden wall, towering hundreds of feet into the sky. The mercenaries had seen desert storms before, but nothing like this. It moved with unnatural speed and precision, as if directed by some invisible force. "Everyone to the vehicles," Victor shouted, but it was too late. The storm engulfed them. In seconds, turning day into night, sand whipped through the air with hurricane force, and visibility dropped to zero. The men stumbled blindly, calling out to each other in panic as the wind howled around them like a living thing in the chaos. Zara felt hands on her bonds, gentle hands that worked quickly to free her from the rope. She tried to cry out, but her voice was nothing more than a rasp. Strong arms lifted her, cradling her against a broad chest as the storm raged around them. "You're safe now," a familiar voice whispered in her ear, and she knew immediately who had found her. Kai carried her through the blinding sandstorm as if it were nothing more than a gentle breeze. She pressed her face against his shoulder, marveling at how his skin remained cool despite the scorching heat. His scent was unlike anything she had ever encountered, like desert flowers, an ancient stone, wild and mysterious. When the storm finally passed, they were alone. The mercenaries, their vehicles, and all trace of the convoy had simply vanished, swallowed by the desert as completely as if they had never existed. Kai laid Zara gently on a soft blanket beneath a shelter of white cloth that seemed to have appeared from nowhere. She blinked up at him, her vision still blurry from dehydration. "Water," she croaked. He lifted a clay vessel to her lips, and the liquid that flowed into her mouth was the most wonderful thing she had ever tasted. It was cool and pure, with a faint sweetness that seemed to heal her parched throat instantly. She drank greedily until he gently pulled the vessel away. "Slowly," he cautioned, his green eyes filled with concern. "Too much too fast will make you sick." As her vision cleared, Zara could see that they were in some kind of oasis. Palm trees swayed overhead, and she could hear the gentle sound of flowing water. But this was impossible. She had been in the deep desert, far from any known water source. "Where are we?" she whispered. "Safe," Kai replied simply, dabbing at her burned skin with a damp cloth. His touch was incredibly gentle, and wherever the cloth passed, the pain seemed to lessen. "The men who took me are gone," he said firmly. "They will not trouble you again." There was something final in his tone that made her shiver. She didn't ask what had happened to Victor and his crew, somehow knowing she didn't want to know the answer. Over the next several hours, Kai tended to her injuries with an expertise that surprised her. He applied cooling salves to her sunburned skin, wrapped her rope burns in soft bandages, and fed her small portions of food and water at regular intervals. His care was professional yet tender, and she found herself studying his face as he worked. "You're not just a desert nomad, are you?" she asked finally. He paused in his ministrations, his eyes meeting hers. "What do you think I am?" "I don't know," she admitted. "But you appeared in the middle of nowhere, survived the heat without breaking a sweat, and somehow made an entire convoy disappear in a sandstorm. That's not exactly normal human behavior." Kai smiled, and for the first time, it reached his eyes. "Perhaps you've been in the sun too long, Dr. Nightwhisper," she started. "How do you know my name?" "The desert knows many things," he said mysteriously. "Rest now. You need to regain your strength." As evening fell and the temperature dropped, Kai built a small fire. The flames cast dancing shadows across his face, making him look even more otherworldly. Zara found herself captivated by his presence, by the quiet strength that seemed to radiate from him. "Thank you," she whispered as sleep began to claim her, "for saving me." He reached out and gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Sleep, Zara. Tomorrow, we begin your journey home." The connection. Zara woke to the scent of coffee and something delicious cooking over the fire. For a moment, she forgot where she was, expecting to find herself back in her tent at the archaeological site. Then memory flooded back. The capture, the 10 days of hell, and her mysterious rescue by the enigmatic Kai. She sat up slowly, pleased to find that the worst of her pain had subsided. Her sunburned skin still ached, but the cooling salves Kai had applied worked like magic. She felt stronger, more alive than she had in days. "Good morning," Kai said, not turning from where he knelt by the fire. "How do you feel?" "Better," she replied, her voice still rough but much improved. "Much better. Actually, what did you put in those salves?" "Desert remedies passed down through generations." he said, offering her a cup of coffee. My people have lived here for thousands of years. We know how to heal with the desert wounds. She accepted the cup gratefully, inhaling the rich aroma. Your people? Kai finally turned to look at her, and she was struck again by how impossibly green his eyes were. In the morning light, they seemed to hold flecks of gold that shifted like tiny flames. The Sahara is not as empty as most believe, he said carefully. There are those who have learned to live in harmony with its moods, to become part of its rhythm. Desert nomads, she said, nodding. I've read about the various tribes. Though most anthropologists believe they've all modernized or moved to cities by now, most have. Kai agreed, but some remain. He handed her a plate of food. Flatbread, dates, and something that looked like meat but tasted unlike anything she had ever eaten. It was delicious and filling, giving her more energy with each bite. What is this? She asked, indicating the meat. Better you don't know, he said with a slight smile. Dessert cuisine is not for the faint of heart. As they ate, Zara found herself studying him more closely. There was something timeless about Kai. As if he had stepped out of an ancient painting, his movements were fluid and graceful. Like a dancer or a warrior, his skin was perfectly golden, without a single blemish or scar despite what must have been a harsh life in the desert. How old are you? She asked suddenly. The question seemed to amuse him. How old do you think I am? I would guess early 30s, but she paused, trying to put her finger on what bothered her. There's something about you that seems much older, ancient, almost. The desert ages a person, he said vaguely, or perhaps it preserves them. After breakfast, he helped her to her feet and led her to a small pool of clear water surrounded by rocks. You should bathe, he said. It will help with the healing, will you? She gestured uncertainly. I'll give you privacy, he assured her, moving away to tend to their supplies. The water was perfect, cool but not cold, with a silky quality that felt wonderful against her damaged skin. As she soaked, Zara tried to make sense of everything that had happened. The sandstorm that had appeared from nowhere, the complete disappearance of her captors, this impossible oasis in the middle of the deep desert. None of it made logical sense. When she emerged from the pool, she found fresh clothes waiting for her, a simple white dress that fit perfectly. Despite Kai having no way of knowing her size, the fabric was incredibly soft, almost like silk, but with a texture she couldn't identify. Where did this come from? She asked when she found him arranging their camp. Desert magic, he said with that enigmatic smile. You keep saying that, but I'm a scientist. I need logical explanations. He turned to face her fully, his expression growing serious. Some things exist beyond the boundaries of your science, Zara. The desert is one of them. That's impossible, is it? He gestured around them. You're standing in an oasis that doesn't appear on any map, wearing clothes that materialized from thin air, completely healed from injuries that should have taken weeks to recover from. At what point do you accept that your understanding of the possible might be limited? She wanted to argue, but the evidence was overwhelming. Everything about the situation defied rational explanation. What are you, Kai? She whispered. He was quiet for a long moment, his green eyes searching her face. I am what the desert made me, he said finally, a guardian, a protector of those who cannot protect themselves. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give you right now. As the day progressed, Zara found herself drawn to him in ways that had nothing to do with gratitude for her rescue. There was something magnetic about Kai, something that called to her on a level deeper than rational thought. When he spoke, she hung on every word. When he moved, she found herself watching the play of muscles beneath his shirt. When he smiled, her heart raced. Tell me about your work, he said as they shared the midday meal. I'm an archaeologist specializing in ancient civilizations, she replied. I was studying some artifacts that suggested the existence of a previously unknown culture that lived in this region thousands of years ago. What kind of culture? The evidence was fragmentary, but it pointed to a people who had an almost supernatural connection to the desert. They seemed to be able to control the weather, to find water where none existed, to survive in conditions that would kill ordinary humans. Kai's expression had grown very still. And what happened to this culture? That's what I was trying to find out when I was captured. She said, the artifacts suggested they didn't die out, they just disappeared. From the historical record, perhaps, Kai said quietly, they simply learned to hide. The truth that evening, as they sat by the fire under a canopy of brilliant stars, Zara finally worked up the courage to ask the question that had been haunting her all day. You're one of them, aren't you? She said quietly. One of the people I was studying. Kai stared into the flames for a long moment before answering. My people call ourselves the Khamseen, the desert winds. We are the last descendants of a civilization that chose to step back from the world of men, to become one with the desert itself. That's impossible, she whispered. But her heart was racing with excitement rather than disbelief. Is it more impossible than a woman surviving 10 days in the desert sun without proper water? More impossible than a sandstorm that appears from nowhere and swallows armed men without a trace? She couldn't argue with his logic. How many of you are there? Few, he admitted. We are a dying people, Zara. Each generation produces fewer children, and many of those choose to leave the desert for the modern world. I am one of the last. Guardians. Guardians of what? Of the old ways. Of the balance between the human world and the desert. Of those who find themselves lost in our domain. The firelight played across his features, highlighting the otherworldly beauty that had captivated her from the first moment she saw him. Is that why you saved me? Because I was lost in your domain? At first, he said, his green eyes meeting hers. But not anymore. What do you mean? He moved closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. I mean that you have awakened something in me that I thought was gone forever. Something I never expected to feel. Kai, she breathed, her pulse quickening. I know it's impossible, he continued, his voice rough with emotion. You have a life to return to, a career, a world that makes sense. And I am bound to this place, to my duties as a guardian. But I cannot deny what I feel for you. Before she could respond, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. The touch of his lips was like lightning, sending shockwaves through her entire body. She had been kissed before, but never like this, never with such desperate passion, such tender reverence. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. I feel it too, she whispered against his lips. From the moment I saw you, standing in the desert, I felt it. Then you understand the tragedy of it, he said sadly. We are from two different worlds, Zara. I cannot leave the desert, and you cannot stay. Says who? She challenged, surprising herself with her vehemence. Maybe I don't want to go back to my old life. Maybe I want to stay here with you. You don't understand what you're saying. Life in the desert is hard, unforgiving. You would have to give up everything, your career, your family, your entire identity. And what would I gain? He smiled, and it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Me. Forever, if you want it. She kissed him again, pouring all of her answer into the embrace. When they parted, she saw wonder in his eyes. Are you certain? He asked. Once you choose this path, there is no going back. The desert changes those who truly belong to it. You would become like me, more than human, but no longer entirely human either. I've spent my entire career studying the past, she said firmly. Maybe it's time I started living in the present. With you, the transformation is not easy, he warned. It requires a binding ritual, a marriage of souls that goes deeper than anything your world recognizes. Will it hurt? Yes, he said honestly, but I will be with you through every moment of it. She thought of her old life, the lonely apartments, the endless research, the colleagues who saw her as nothing more than a rival for grants and tenure. Then she looked at Kai, at the love shining in his impossible green eyes, and knew her choice was already made. When do we begin? She asked. He pulled her close, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. At dawn, he murmured against her hair, the desert spirits are strongest then. That night, they lay together under the stars, talking about their future, about the life they would build together in the hidden places of the Sahara. Kai told her about the secret oases where his people lived, about the ancient knowledge they preserved, about the magic that flowed through the very sand beneath their feet. Will I be able to do what you do? She asked. Control the weather, find water, all of it. In time, he promised, the desert will teach you, just as it taught me. But it will take years to master, and the learning never truly ends. I have time, she said, snuggling closer to his warmth, all the time in the world. As the first light of dawn began to touch the eastern horizon, Kai rose and began preparing for the ritual that would bind them together forever. Zara watched him work, her heart full of anticipation and joy. She had come to the desert searching for ancient mysteries, and instead had found something infinitely more precious, a love that transcended the boundaries between worlds, between human and something more than human. As Kai turned to her with the ritual cup in his hands, his eyes glowing with otherworldly light, Zara smiled and stepped forward to embrace her destiny. The desert had claimed her, body and soul, and she had never been happier. 3 months later, when the search teams finally gave up looking for Dr. Zara Nightwhisper, they concluded that she had been killed by the criminals who had kidnapped her, her body lost forever to the shifting sands of the Sahara. They were wrong, of course. She was very much alive, living in a hidden oasis with the man she loved, learning the ancient secrets of the desert people. Sometimes, travelers reported seeing a woman with golden skin and violet eyes walking the dunes at sunset. But these stories were dismissed as mirages or hallucinations brought on by the heat. Zara didn't mind. She had found her true home at last, in the arms of the desert wind who had whispered to her in her darkest hour, "You're safe now." And she was, forever.